The Boys Season 4. We talked about the 3-episode premiere last week, which was a hefty amount of episodes to discuss and to react to. But now we're with episode 4 of the latest season of the Prime Video original series. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty details of this show as well. So if you've not seen the latest episode, which is entitled Wisdom of the Ages, definitely go watch that and come back and finish the rest of our conversation later. But before we get into spoilers and talk about all the details and all the specifics, let's just start with our big picture thoughts about this week's episode. What did you think about the latest installment of The Boys?
You talked about how dark this show was going to get, and it's getting there. This show or this episode is, to be honest, it's a lot of therapy. It's a lot of therapy going on. Like, I feel like every character is going through some form of some kind of absolvement or therapy, or just trying to figure their shit out. And that was, again, I thought that was like really like the big theme, one of the biggest themes of the episode. And seeing that, man, I noticed some crazy stuff to come, but this episode definitely packed enough surprises, but it had some really cool stylistic stuff. I'll get to later, that I really like. Very small, nothing crazy, but I thought that was cool as well. But man, it's things keep getting shocking. I don't know why. The Boys is just, it's always going to be a shocker every episode. Like, I can't believe they did that. I can't believe they did that. Can't believe they did that. And that continues to be the case here, man. So another good episode, no complaints. Just can't wait to get to
it. This week's episode of The Boys definitely has some of the more shocking, gratuitous material that I think the show has exhibited thus far that we'll certainly examine and talk about when we get into spoilers. But ultimately, we are diving into very, very dark and sometimes depressing territory with a lot of these characters, because I think we're also grappling and reckoning with the idea of legacy in this show. And a lot of what this episode at least spoke to me about was the legacy of certain characters, not only the legacy that they've already established for themselves, but what will their legacy be that they leave behind if they are to make it out of this war between the Boys and the Seven and Vought. And it also feels shockingly close to mortality for so many of them. Like the actions that are happening with everybody, it's like you're playing with death here. You're definitely like on the verge of doing something that you can't come back from. And that's really resonating with me the more that I watch these episodes, and the more I guess we get to the ending of the series entirely, the closer that we edge towards the final season, which we know is going to come around the corner after this is all said and done. But it definitely is getting to very dire and desperate places for a lot of the characters. They're starting to do things that might be uncharacteristic, where it's like, yeah, you've descended to a level that you normally wouldn't descend to, and that's causing some very disturbing imagery. That's causing some questionable actions. Obviously, morality is always going to be a question on the table for many of the characters here, but it's becoming very, very apparent. And I think that the show is doing just a great job at communicating that. Some of the shocking stuff that does happen in this episode, we can question whether or not it's needed. I don't know, but it's definitely, it's reinforcing, ultimately what the show is and what it's about. And it's not steering away from what it's trying to be, and at least what it's trying to tell us as an audience in terms of who these people are. Like, yeah, these aren't role models, by any stretch of the imagination. They're very human and very, very flawed. And a lot of them have to do some fucked up things just to survive on a day-to-day basis and to try to find some semblance of humanity. And so I thought that was like another interesting thing that was briefly tackled in this episode. So a lot of really, really interesting key movements with many of the characters that we're going to get into right now. So again, if you haven't seen the latest episode of The Boys, go watch it, come back and finish out the rest of our conversation. Let's start off with Annie and Firecracker. There's been a battle, a beef brewing between these two. And I got to say, it's probably boiled over at this point. After some shenanigans between Firecracker and Mother's Milk and Butcher, they try to blackmail her. It doesn't really work. She goes on TV. Firecracker goes on TV, and she's going to use this opportunity to really just out Annie entirely. She's holding this grudge against this woman because they go back to pageant days. They go way, way back. They have a long shared history with each other, and Firecracker has pretty much made it her mission to put Annie on the chopping block and to expose her and to try to just tear down this image that she's built up for herself, especially in terms of being in opposition to Vought and to Homelander and the Seven. And so she talks about Annie's first save, and we start to get a better understanding of why she holds this hatred towards Annie. And basically, when Annie is attempting to save some hostages at Walmart, Annie ends up blinding a mother of three, and we find out that Firecracker has a very close association with this person. I'm assuming it is her mother, but it doesn't stop there. It goes even further. Ultimately, Firecracker is able to get a hold of Annie's medical records and reveal to the world that Annie essentially has had an abortion. She was with the child, she got pregnant by Huey, but in some off-screen events that happened outside of the season, 6 months prior to what's happening now, Annie had an abortion, which is obviously going to ignite a political firestorm and call into question her image, her public facing image, all of these things, because abortion is a very, very touchy and sensitive subject for a lot of people, pretty much for everybody. Everybody has an opinion on that, which
Mm-hmm.
reflects our own real our political ongoings that happen with that type of discourse. And so it was a big moment, and of course Annie, it resulted in her lashing out and pretty much beating Firecracker to a pulp, which I think is a reasonable reaction. But what did you think about that
Mm-hmm.
moment? Just all of these revelations, the key info that was revealed about Annie's first big save as a soup, but then also just the fact that Firecracker publicly decided to reveal this very, very sensitive information.
That got so messy. Like, I did not expect none of that. I didn't expect to hear about Firecracker and her relations with that little boy, 15-year-old boy. I didn't expect Annie to blinded a dude at Walmart. I didn't expect an abortion. I was just like, what is going on? Like, it was literally information hit after information hit. What a crazy moment. But I talked about last episode, I want to see more of Annie. Low key, this is the Annie I'm looking for. I've been wanting this girl to whip ass like this for so long. I was like, finally, she's going at it. I was very happy, I think, to see her angry. She can fly now, which is cool. She got there so fast and just started going at it at Firecracker, man. But man, what more can I say? I mean, it's really crazy. But I think Annie, of course, whatever the political discourse is happening is going to happen. That's what The Boys is about. But I think I was happy for her as a character to feel like she had enough enough, I guess, control to just be angry, because I feel like she never gets to be mad because she is quote unquote Starlight. I feel like that's one of the reasons she tried to leave the persona of Starlight behind, is like she doesn't have control over anything she's done. She doesn't get to be a rat. She doesn't get to be impulsive and make these certain decisions. And here I was like, shoot, go whip her ass, bet. You know what I'm saying? You finally get to let off some steam, especially this girl who's talking all this shit and throwing your medical records around is crazy. You know what I'm saying? Versus her, that is not the same as this girl being a registered sex offender. That's two completely different things. And so, man, I was pretty happy with the whole fight, to be honest. And I understand MM was like, look, we can't do this on TV, but I was like, I was pretty happy for everything going down.
Yeah. Man, it sucks for Annie as a character, obviously, for that to be revealed in that type of forum. That's just such an invasion of privacy
Yeah.
that nobody deserves.
Mm-hmm.
And I just find it so interesting, again, just because of the parallels and the discourse that happens with our own real reality and our own conversations in real life, and the fact that there's the ongoing debate about everything with pro-choice, pro-life, all of that stuff, and just some of the just honestly the ridiculous political moves that have been made, with Roe v. Wade and all of that stuff, and just like how much it's
Mm-hmm.
just caused so much damage and violent action towards women
Yeah.
over the course of these past few years in particular. And I think that, like, Annie going through this moment, it's just reflective of the fact that there are political leaders out there, and there are real people who are not even in association with any sort of political power, who feel like that there should be some sort of monitoring of women, that there should be some
Mm-hmm.
oversight of women and the choices that they make, that their medical records or their medical history should be on public display, because they
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be allowed to make a decision like that. They shouldn't be allowed to kill a child, an unborn baby, or whatever the case may be. And it's just such a violent and toxic way of thinking, to
Yeah.
remove any sort of privacy, any agency from a person's decision. And so, yeah, for her to go through this, and for Firecracker to be the person to just do that, obviously her being this public agitator, being this far right wing person who would be willing to do something like this, she's the perfect vehicle to go
Mm-hmm.
down those really dark depths, and to do something that's just so fucking low. And so for Annie to react that way, more power to her. Love that it happened. the unfortunate thing is that it did have repercussions. You know,
Absolutely.
she has this political association with Singer, and now Singer's like, yeah, I can't be associated with you because of what you did here. It's probably less about the fact that the information was revealed that she got an abortion. Like that doesn't help because that's not going to help his political stance. But then she also got physically violent, you know,
Yeah.
and ultimately she's going to have to deal with that. But it was, I mean, wow, it was just just a crazy emotional moment, a really, really shocking set of events. I mean, we knew that Annie and Huey, you know, they were pregnant at the time, but for everything to come out this way, I think that was just like the effective way to do that. Cause like us as an audience, you know, unless you brushed up on it immediately, you probably forgot, like, yeah, they did have a, you know, they did talk about being pregnant. But then to you know, purposely make the decision to do all of that stuff off screen so that when this information is brought back up, we know like, oh shit, she did have a
That
baby.
did
Like
happen.
they did decide that it wasn't the right time for them. Like, oh my God, how awful that is for her. I thought it was just really, really, really effective stuff. And not only that, Sister Sage was the master orchestrator of it all. Once again,
Okay.
she's the one
Pebble
behind the
down the mountain.
scenes who is like, yeah, now the pebble rolls down the mountain once again. This is another spoke in the wheel that we are adding to try to just destroy the boys overall. I want to talk about Huey. Huey goes on a particular journey in this episode. He's trying to do everything he can to save his father, played by
Yeah.
Simon Pegg, who has slipped into a coma. And
Mm-hmm.
it's looking very, very desperate now for Huey. There are no positive signs that his father's gonna come out of this coma. Basically, all of the medical people tell him that he has a very, very limited amount of time to live. And on top of that, his mother, who's now re-entered his life, who we just found out is working for Vought, she has the final say in terms of what they do. And apparently, his father's finals, you know, his dying wishes was to sign a do not resuscitate and allow him to be basically removed from the plug, you know, at the hospital. But
Mm-hmm.
Huey's not willing to accept this. He's trying to do whatever he can, and it basically forces him to work alongside A Train, because he needs A Train to go into Homelander's apartment to steal some Compound V. Initially, A Train is reluctant, but the two find sort of a shared common ground to say, like, hey, we have history. A Train, you killed my first girlfriend. This is what set in motion all of this shit to begin with. But I'm willing to forgive you. I'm willing to move past that if you can go get this
Mm-hmm.
Compound V for me. And A Train ultimately does go receive it, or go retrieve it, and gives it to Huey. Initially, Huey's like, you know, I was gonna tell you fuck you, but they eventually patch it up. They find a common ground. They move past, you know, this really terrible incident between them two. So how did you feel about just that reconciliation that's been building for 4 seasons now? The fact that like Huey was able, I guess, to find a way through and to forgive A Train, you know, at least to the extent of, you know, he was able to tell him in person, like, you know what, we're good, we can move on. And this might also further influence A Train to
Mm-hmm.
switch sides and possibly
Yeah.
become an agent of the boys and an agent of Mother's Milk in their fight against Vought.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when it happened. I was like, not only does this make A Train, I think, again, potentially feel absolved of the sin of killing Huey's girlfriend, but maybe has he ever felt forgiveness before? You know what I mean? At least within his peers, has he? His brother hasn't forgiven him. Sure as hell, whatever he has against with Homelander, who cares about Homelander? Like Homelander's not gonna forgive anything that happens, and so like, wait, you guys have the humanity to I killed your girlfriend, you forgive me? That might go a long way by the end of all of this. And that might have been the thing that fully flipped A Train. He wasn't 100%. That might have, in my mind right now, he a nice 90 after that, after that conversation. He might be a nice 90% flip. Man, Huey, I mean, going through it. Can you blame him? The one thing that can save your parent, he went to go get it. He did what he needed to do to go get it. And you said it in your non-spoiler review about, talking about how some people have to step down and potentially do things they might have never done before. And Huey, one, thinking about injecting his father with V, and two, working with the dude that killed his girlfriend, is that. He literally stepped to the levels we've never seen him before. And even Kimiko's like, what is wrong with you? I think we should just let your dad die. Like, what is going on here? But that pre-grieving process, that I haven't lost him yet, but I'm about to lose him. All that makes you do some crazy things. That makes you go to John Q. You know what I'm saying? it makes you do some it makes you do some crazy shit. And that's where Huey is left, man. So again, I can't blame him completely. It makes sense what he's doing, but man, I love how by the end of it all, technically he didn't make that decision to give his dad V. I think that was the right thing to do. So shout out to Huey for, again, he's been the character that's always felt like our moral compass. Shout out to him for kind of continuing to kind of be that, even though it felt like he strayed from the path for a little bit.
And how about that guy that he killed in such a violent way? We've never.
Oh man, was that box cutter?
It was a box cutter he used. We've never seen Huey get that violent before. I mean, you know, it was
crazy.
him or the other guy. So he chose his own life and preserved himself. But the way that he did it with the box cutter, it was so violent, and the blood was all over him by the end of it. And you can just see the difference in reaction. It's basically a mirror image. The blood on his face in this situation compared to when A-Train ran through his girlfriend and he ended up with all of her blood. He was frightened. He was terrified. He was at a loss for words that first time that we saw him covered in blood. This time, he's in a different place. And like you said, that pre-grieving has caused him to make some, you know, at times questionable, maybe irrational decisions. And that refusal to let go, that refusal to let things play out the way that they probably should play out. And now in this particular situation, we have Butcher being the voice of reason, which, you know, doesn't really happen that often. But Butcher's like, hey, one, the V's killing me. So there's your first example. Secondly, your dad is already like very far gone. What's the likelihood that it's going to do anything positive for him? You probably should let him go. Like, this just might be that time. And you just never see Butcher in that position to be of counsel to Huey in that way. And it effectively, I think, causes Huey to change his heart. Now, at the end of the episode, when he goes back and he basically pulls back and doesn't inject his father with the V, the V ends up inside of his veins anyway in the IV. I guess we're to just assume that his mother did it. Like,
a plot twist.
She just slipped it out of his pocket real quick and just injected the father with the V. What could that even be about? Like, I don't know if you have any thoughts or any speculation, but it's crazy because she's largely been of the mindset that, hey, this is what your father wanted. We should let him. We should let him pass on. But now she's moving in an entirely different way. If she is, you know, the one indeed that I think we're to assume it has injected him with the V.
I honestly just think she's been feeling the ways in which Huey has been feeling, but as a newly a reemerged mother, I think even though she has been super vulnerable, maybe she still did put kind of that mask over of like, she has maybe been thinking about doing something like that, or if she could, you know what I mean, doing something to potentially bring him back, but she didn't know exactly how. She didn't know if it was the right thing to do. Again, similar to Huey, we seen him go through all those steps. We didn't see her go through all those steps. He decided not to do it. At the very end of that, she decided to go through it at the end of that. But I think she was feeling very similar things to him, but maybe she's just, again, as a newly reemerged mother, maybe that's how she was thinking. That's how I protect my child, by having him think this is the right thing to do, even though I might be feeling other thoughts. That's kind of how I thought about it.
Yeah, I wonder if a part of her, you know, once she found out that the V was potentially a viable option, she said, well, maybe this is my chance to have a family again. You know, now that I'm like fully back,
I missed out.
I've missed out. I'm seeing what's here. And we've done the hard part, kind of. We've addressed the immediate reactions that Huey would have in that situation, which are going to be anger and confusion, and a lack of understanding. So now that we've gotten past that, maybe we can put the building blocks in place to maybe have a family again and maybe be one unified family. This is a really traumatic incident. Typically stuff like that, when it happens, it brings people closer together, oftentimes in families. And so maybe she saw that as an opportunity to do so. But I mean, the ramifications physically for what that's going to mean for Huey's father, it doesn't spell good things, as we know. I quickly want to talk about Sister Sage and Deep, who've had this on again, off again thing going on for a little bit now. We saw them previously have some sexual chemistry and fuck each other over some kinks that they have for one another. They bond over food. I forgot to point this out last week, but she eats terribly. Like, she doesn't have a great diet. I mean,
it's so bad.
We found out in the first episode she had like a bunch of Taco Bell. She ordered a lot of seafood for them. I mean, I guess I don't know what it is, like the metabolism. I don't know. I'm not a dietitian or anything like that, but that is her drawback. That's one big drawback that she has, I guess, for her powers. But when Deep first approached her, you know, in this episode, and he's like, you know, let's get back together, let's do that again, she doesn't want anything to do with him. She's completely disgusted and revolted by this guy. Like, ugh, no way. I would never do that again. I'll never stoop that low. But then, towards the later parts of this episode, she kind of comes around and she asks him to do something that, I didn't have in my bingo card for this here at all. How can I explain this? How can I make this make sense? She she basically asks him to perform a lobotomy on her to remove pieces of her brain, because that's the only way I guess she can really feel normal and human, because her brain grows so quickly and at such a rapid pace because she is the smartest person. So he asks her to perform a lobotomy, and we get quite possibly one of the more uncomfortable scenes in all of boys history. And then they fuck. The two fuck after she just regresses herself down probably a good 2 decades in that moment. She decides, like, yeah, I'm gonna open my legs for this guy. What was your reaction to that moment? I mean, who writes this shit, bro? Like, who comes up with these ideas? Because I was just so shocked by it. But at the same time, it does kind of it says a lot, characteristically about these two and just like what they're willing to do to feel the things that they're feeling.
At the end of last episode, you can see the like lobotomy tool sitting there, like at the very end of the episode, right? As her and the Deep are kind of getting into it, getting intimate. And I was like, okay, what is that? Like, what is going on here? And I had a feeling of like potentially what it was. I was like, nah, let's get to this episode. We get to this episode. She tells him to perform a lobotomy. And my first thought is, who did it the last time? Like, has she been doing lobotomies on herself? Is that a thing? People crazy.
She has to know, because she knows specifically how to make this happen. She has very specific directions.
She's been performing lobotomies on herself, which is insane. But Sister Sage, like you said, her brain is constantly growing. One, it has to be almost exhausting to be the smartest person in the world. There has to be times where you're like, I wish I wasn't this smart. I don't want to see through everything. For somebody like that, there is no escapism. You can't do anything except for her, make my brain smaller for a couple hours. That's all you can do in order to get, I guess, that feeling back. And that's what she does. She and of course she feels repulsed by the Deep, because the smart her would be like, hell no, I would never mess with this dude. But potentially when she allows her hormones to outdo her smarts, to outdo her intelligence, maybe now he's attractive. Maybe now I don't have to think too much about who this guy is, what he's gone through, anything about his personality. I can just enjoy what I feel versus what's in my brain. And that's that moment. She is wanting the emotions. She wants the emotion more than she wants the thought. And she gets that out of the Deep. And that's their relationship now is, all right, if you lobotomize me, I promise we can, I forgot what she said, watch something. She's like, watch, we can fucking watch. I feel like it was like Martin or something crazy, but it was like, I was like, yeah, okay, cool. But that's where it is now. What a crazy relationship. But hey, even the Deep was like, I mean, okay, if that's how you get off, let's do it. And he did it, man. The Deep is he'll do anything. He'll do something strange for a piece of change, and that's what he does, man. So yeah, here we are.
Oh yeah, nothing is too far for the Deep. He's seen
nothing's too. He said it was until it wasn't.
No, yeah, he's seen it done at all. And as you explain it there, it's like, damn, I kind of feel you. Like, you just for a moment want to feel normal and not have to think about everything all the time. That's the humanity in the character, where it's like, wow, this is the craziest shit I've seen. Like, we're performing a real lobotomy on a person on TV. Okay, this is 2024. How do we get here? But underneath all of that, when you unpack the desires of why she's doing it, it's like, damn, yeah, you would have to do something this extreme just to feel what most people feel on any given day at any given minute. You don't get that luxury. I'm gonna put my Dr. Umar hat on, and I'm gonna get real woke for a second. How do you feel? Audience, please don't kill me. I'm just asking a question. How do you feel about a white man performing a lobotomy on a black woman, dumbing her down basically to fuck her? That's the question. That's it. How do you feel about that?
I mean, it's pretty crazy, bro. I ain't even gonna hold you. I don't,
because it can kind of be looked at it through that lens, can it not? Like, a black woman is dumbing herself down to just accept herself, to allow to allow this thing to occur, to just say like,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess I'll fuck you. I guess I'll do it.
No, that's absolutely right, man. And I guess again, she's doing that also, so she doesn't have to think about that either. Because Sister Sage is very like, it's funny, even though she's doing some of the things she's doing, it's for like her own personal gain to use her own brain to see her own experiments. She's not really down with the racist shit like that. You know what I'm saying? Like anytime something's happened, she's looking at Firecracker on TV. That's what your racist ass get. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
She's always like,
who's uppity now? You know, type shit.
yeah, who's uppity now? Like she's not really down with the racist shit. So, I agree. It's crazy, but that's what the lobotomy is for. She doesn't want to think about that.
Yeah,
she doesn't want to think about that.
I mean, that in and of itself is a thing, right? Like,
it is.
Sometimes as Black people, I just don't want to think about that, bro. Like, I just don't. I don't want to always think about these layers to this shit. I don't always want to go and be like, yeah, this, that, and pull out all the literary text and the big, vocabulary for like. I just don't always want to go there. Sometimes we just want to just want to be normal and not have to think about that shit. Like, and we can apply that to anything, really. Not only just like discourse and the issues politically and socially that we deal with and the amount that we have to carry on our own shoulders, but I mean, even in entertainment, how many times do we say like, I'm just trying to watch a reality show. I'm not trying to think about
facts.
that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't need some 3-hour Christopher Nolan biopic about fucking quantum physics.
Love Island, damn it.
Literally, like we all do that. We all go through that, and just have those moments where it's like, I don't care to think about this shit, bro. I just need something to just comfort me and to be there and to be safe and give me pleasure and move on, and I think it's kind of speaking to a lot of those things. I feel like, to what you said, she probably brought up a reality show when she said like, yeah, we'll do this and then we'll just watch.
It probably was. I can't remember what show it was. It was like a memorable show too, but I can't remember.
It wasn't like a made up,
it was like a real show,
real thing. Yeah. So I honestly, I feel you, sis. I feel you, Sister Sage. Like, it is what it is. Let's move on and talk about Homelander in this episode, who has a really, really big showing, as he usually does. But in this episode, Homelander, we go to, again, as we've just pointed out numerous times, we go to some really, really dark places. But Homelander spends pretty much all of this episode going back to his origin. This is really re-examining and recontextualizing Homelander's origin story, and he goes back to the place that he was effectively born, which was in a lab. He was created, he was engineered to be a soup and to be who he became. And so he goes back into the deep, dark, cobweb infested laboratories underneath Vault, this secret lab, to basically confront his makers, the people who were responsible for his upbringing. And in doing so, he comes into contact with a couple of key scientists that he has not fond memories of, actually very, very traumatic memories of. The first one that he talks to is a scientist. I think his name was Fudgy. Or exactly, no, it's not Fudgy. That was a different. The name is Frank. The name of the scientist is Frank. And basically, he's going down this whole sort of memory lane trip, talking about how they used to shoot the baskets, with the paper balls and da. He's recounting all of this stuff, and then he points out this oven that's right across from him, and he's like, "Yeah, you remember that time you put me in the oven?" Basically to just like test his limits, to test like his abilities and his resistance as a soup. Like, what could he withstand? And this experimentation that he underwent. And he's doing this really snarky thing with the scientist Frank before he basically tells him like, okay, you get in now. Like, we're gonna do this now. We're gonna see how you feel about being inside a boiling hot oven and feel your skin and flesh burn. The unfortunate thing for Frank is that he's not a soup. He's not chemically engineered. He doesn't have V in him. This is a human being being put in a fucking who knows how hot it is oven. And this is just a really, really shocking scene. I mean, it's so violent, it's so shocking, and we already know Homelander, very terrible person, very terrible character, has done some of the most heinous shit ever. But I mean, we just go to another level once again here. We just go to deeper, darker places with him, and we see like how far it really goes with him, and how he's willing to just showcase his power and his supremacy over other people, especially those that are helpless, and those that are human beings who can't stand up against him. What did you think, man? Just seeing this whole thing unfold, just like the slow pacing of it, the slow build up to the ultimate results of Frank being cooked in an oven in the way that he was.
As soon as Homelander gets down there, somebody's dying. Like, I don't know. I didn't know who. I don't know how. I'm like, none of this is good. 2, he bought a cake. What? Oh my God. It was like a whale cake. I just like, and that's what, again, makes this show so good is every time Homelander's in a room, the tension goes up so high. And especially, he's going back to a place where he was experimented on. I didn't know what was going to happen. And we come to this moment with Frank. And what I like about, I think this whole sequence, this whole family reunion basement experiment sequence is it actually does give us little human parts of Homelander. It gives us like pieces of him that were hurt at one point or sad at one point. Some of those things we don't always talk about with Homelander. We just always talk about how strong he is, how scary he is. But in his conversation with Frank, who put him in the incinerator, he was like, that shit really fucking hurt. He said, I'm a soup and my skin didn't char or anything, but that shit hurt, dude. And that shit is not okay. And Frank starts apologizing. He says sorry. He's like, oh, now you're sorry. You weren't apologizing back then. Incinerates that nigga. And man, what a crazy moment. But it was something about it. I was like, Homelander did feel something. And I think that was like my takeaway of like, this dude actually hurt at one point. And he's actually here, not just for some crazy revenge, but because these people actually not only, of course, hurt him physically, but hurt his feelings. Mm-hmm. They actually created the monster that we see today. So yeah, I thought it was pretty important, actually.
Yeah, he was a boy, that they were doing. This was all before he could really have his own agency, make his own choices, and kind of dictate his movements. He was still young when they were doing this experimentation on him, and not having a normal life, not having true parental figures, not having any sort of positive influence. Like, you're growing up in a lab. Man,
that's why I think that's why he was so mad they kept calling him John.
Yeah,
he was like, that's who I was supposed to be. Y'all didn't make me into John. Y'all made me into Homelander. So Homelander, who the fuck you gonna get today? That's why I think he kept saying that. He's like, no, I'm Homelander to you because that's who you wanted me to be. All right, bet.
Yeah. Like, look what I am now, and look how I've come to. He's like the Grim Reaper, when he walks in that room. That's essentially what he is, and it's just a really harrowing scene that, again, is just like super violent, but it doesn't stop there. Then he turns his attention to Marty, which is crazy because he says like, oh yeah, Marty, you were kind of nice. You weren't the worst. You weren't the worst of the batch. And it's like, well, damn. I mean, if he's nice, what's going to happen to him? But he remembers one thing. Marty did give him a nickname.
Oh, man.
Marty named him Squirt, because he caught Homelander, John, a young John at that time, doing what a young boy would do, just jacking off, discovering himself, going through hormones and all of that stuff. And it became an embarrassing moment for him because Marty decided to bestow this nickname on him, make it even more embarrassing, for young John at that point. And he remembers that. And so he decides to tell Marty, like, okay, well, we're going to flip the tables. You're going to pull your pants down. You're going to jack off in front of all of us. And if you're not able to do so, if you can't get erect, you're losing that thing. It's going away. It's going bye-bye. And it instantly becomes one of the most uncomfortable things to watch immediately.
Oh my God.
Because Homelander is just sitting down, very relaxed, laughing his ass off, hysterical, because Marty just can't do it. It's like you're in front of a dozen people. Your life is pretty much being threatened, and now you have to somehow get yourself erect in this moment. It's pretty much impossible. Like, you're asking somebody to find a needle in a haystack at that point, and he's not able to do so. And Homelander, after he's done laughing hysterically, he just lasers through pretty much his entire pelvis, and that man, his whole thing is gone. That is the end of him. And finally, Barbara, who has a history with Homelander, she shows up and she's like, just end this, put him out of his misery, and he does. He kills him. But thoughts on this one? I mean, this is a complete different sort of approach to torturing somebody as opposed to what happened with Frank, but even more humiliating than what we saw with Frank. Like, he just made Frank sort of just live in the reality of what was about to happen. I think Frank knew, like, oh my God, this is the end for me. Let me be apologetic. Yeah. This is just so much more drawn out, and I would dare say much more uncomfortable compared to what Frank went through.
Yeah. It's almost about like them not caring enough to remember the little moments too. Because in both instances, Frank didn't remember. He was like, "What are you talking about? I don't remember shooting the basket or whatever." And Marty is like, "Wait, what? What are you talking about? What is this? You gave me a nick. I gave you a nickname. What's going on here?" It's almost like them not remembering that made it even worse than what it was. But like you said, what an uncomfortable moment. I can't even. What also makes this environment so squeamish is the people in the background, is the workers like not even wanting to pay attention. Like they're over here on their computers, like pretending to work. No one damn where they ain't working. He's like, "Come over here, everybody, come look. We're gonna make him masturbate in front of everybody." It is so degrading and so demeaning, man. And it does speak to even the what Homelander came there for. He did come there to get revenge on a lot of this childhood trauma that he has. He never had any intent of Marty or Frank in particular living, probably, you know what I mean? He never had any of that intent. So it made sense that it went down that way, but man, it was so dark, dude. It was crazy.
Man, do you think we need this? Like, honestly, just be, Homelander by this point, well established, terrible human being. Like, well established. This is the worst of the worst. Like, there is no coming back from who he is as a person. I mean, this is like Hitler for soups, essentially. Do we need more of this? Like, I mean, because these are really, I think for a lot of people, this might be a turnoff. Like, how can we go much further than like seeing stuff like this happen? Like, how much more do we have to communicate in terms of like, yeah, he's a shitty person. He's willing to do whatever. He's willing to degrade and demean people. And yes, it kind of speaks to, what he went through. It is a revenge mission at the end of the day. He felt like he was wronged as a kid, but I don't know. Have you ever just thought, watching this or maybe even any other moment that maybe it's just like too much? Like, do we need any more reasons to feel the ways that we feel about this character, just knowing how despicable he can be?
Yeah, I don't think so. Especially a lot of the episode was it felt like another them doubling down on how ridiculous this dude is. When A Train is in there trying to get the V, it's like, "Oh, what is this? Is this a thing of milk? Is this a drawer of milk laying around? Like, what's going on here?" He has the V with him, and then like all of these things going down. It's just like, man, I don't. Because to be honest, out of all of that, the main thing I wanted to hear, my main takeaway is his conversation with the lady.
Oh, Barbara.
That was talking about Barbara talking about the reasons, the psychologist in which why he needed love. That's the only part I need to hear. To me, that was my best takeaway. It was like, oh, that's how they got you to feel the way you feel. I was cool after, I would have been cool after that. But yeah, I think you're right. We don't have to keep doubling down on this thing at this point. You know what I mean? And in fact, could we have just had a episode without him? Like, he already had such a big presence on the world. Like, maybe this could have been an episode without Homelander completely. I probably would have been okay with that. So yeah, I think I agree. I don't necessarily need to keep seeing this over and over.
Yeah, as much as I love the show and I enjoy it and it consistently surprises me, I can't help but think like I mean, I think everybody has like a limit. Like, God damn, man, like, are we doing this again, bro?
Yeah.
I think everybody just has a moment where it's like, yo, okay, we know he is scum of the earth. We understand that clearly, and I do think that it's important to showcase where he comes from because we've only hinted at it. Really, we've seen a couple of flashbacks here and there. To go to the place, I think is important. To see those people, I do think is important. But yeah, what would have that conversation been like between him and Barbara? Maybe we will get insight into that, in the next episode. But we saw that at the end of it. You pointed out Frank and Marty. I mean, he didn't have intentions on them living or anybody else. I mean, he just bloodied up and killed everybody. And the final shot of this episode is him just covered in blood with a smile on his face. I mean, he was happy that this happened. He's glad that he did this. This is, I guess, one step closer to him realizing his ultimate dream and goal of soup supremacy and the eradication of humans. But the road to get there is just, I mean, it's treacherous. It's really crazy to see. But maybe that's the effective thing. Maybe we're supposed to feel these ways like, yeah, this might just be too far, bro. And perhaps that is, it's kind of like the thinking of heels in wrestling. Like, if you really hate a guy in wrestling, then they're doing their job correctly. Like, oh yeah, we're not supposed to like the heels. We're not supposed to root for the bad guys. Like, if you actually look at them and say like, yeah, bro, I go away, I can't stand you, then they're effective.
You're doing it
You're
right.
doing it right. So maybe that's what they're doing here. Last thing before we wrap up, we should just quickly mention Butcher. He didn't have a ton to do in this episode, but
Mm-hmm.
I just gotta wonder. We know that like the V is killing him. He's on a very short timeline here. He only has a few months left to live. He has a tumor in his brain, but something is in him. Like something's going on. Like
the parasite, man.
It's something happening.
Got a symbiote in that nigga.
Like, is that a result of the V? Is something else happening? Like, has the tumor spread and become like this living thing within him? Because they continue to zoom in on those scenes. Like we saw it earlier in the 3-episode premiere. Something is like lingering in his brain. It's like a tapeworm or something. And then in this episode, he's in the shower, and before he collapses, we see something even bigger crawling in his back. It's like this thing has grown in a very short amount of time. So I'm just trying to pinpoint like what's really happening here. Like is there just like a, I don't know, is there like a compound effect that's going on? Like it starts with the tumor, but now it's resulted in like a living parasite. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, or just like what's really happening with Butcher and what's ultimately causing his life to deteriorate like this.
You know, I think the worm or parasite is the power. I don't think it's a result of the power.
Interesting. Okay.
I think that is it. Like, and we're supposed to make it seem like, oh, he's dying because of this parasite. But maybe that's where his strength is. That's literally, you know, we've seen a lot of weird powers out here.
Yeah.
People can do all kind of things. And I think we usually think about it as straight physical. But what if that's like his thing? What if the worm does things and he can manipulate it in ways he doesn't know he can manipulate it? That's kind of, I think that's like, that's my new theory anyways. Like maybe that is the power in some way. Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that could actually maybe aid him. You know, maybe maybe there's something there that could save him, you know, from ultimately perishing at the hands of this V. I hadn't thought about that.
I actually have a new, I don't know if it's I guess it's kind of a theory.
All right, let's hear it.
But what if the anti-V could save Butcher?
Okay. Yeah.
The thing that's supposed to kill the suits,
right,
and, you know, that we got from Gen V that he knows about. What if that saves his life? Mm-hmm. What if we think he's about to die? If the power is killing him, remove the power, maybe Butcher doesn't die. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. It's a very crazy shot in the dark, but I'm like, it's something on the table.
But it might be that simple. It really just might be that simple of an idea. And you know, him being the one to discover that is not an accident. You know, he's the one that ultimately went to Godolkin and found out that they were developing this.
Exactly.
Newman is really the only one in possession of it. Though he is aware of it, but now she's the one that's like, yeah, it's in my hands now, because she obviously, that goes against her own desires and wants. But maybe that is the thing. We have to figure out something that's gonna prevent this from killing him. He can't die. Like that can't happen.
He can't die.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I can consider that. Last quick thing I think we should mention. Frenchie. Yes. He ultimately, you know, he does basically reveal to his lover that, you know, he's responsible for the death of his family. And this results in obviously really, really hurt feelings and a lot of anger. Colin is like, I don't want anything to do with you. It felt like a pretty quick payoff to something they set up in those first 3 episodes. I thought it might have dragged out a little bit longer, but we do see that Frenchie, you know, ultimately does confess just his role in ultimately being responsible for the death of Colin's family. But Colin, you know, I think reasonably is just like, this is done. Like, get the fuck away from me. It's over. Any thoughts on that, or just like how they handle just sort of the I guess the evolution of that story?
Yeah. I have to actually attribute an idea that Michael had, Black Gay Comic Geek, who has been on our podcast before. But he was saying something how usually side stories are cool because they end up wrapping back to the main story. And it doesn't feel like Frenchie and Colin feel like that right now. Like, it really doesn't feel like that's going anywhere super important per se. So I think that is a criticism I also have. Like, I wish Colin was wrapped into all of the big picture somehow, and maybe that's still the case and we just haven't seen it yet. That could definitely be a thing, but I just want to keep my eye on that. Like, yeah, where are they exactly going with this storyline completely? But other than that, you know, what a crazy thing to reveal to somebody, that you killed their parents. I just couldn't even imagine like any of that on either side. Like, wow, goodbye, Colin. Like, I'm not sure we'll ever see him again
Yeah.
on that front. I'm sure we will, but I wouldn't be surprised if, like, as a person, for real, if you never see that person ever again, because I would not be coming back, sir. Goodbye. Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
No, yeah, that's actually a really good point. That I mean, it doesn't feel connected to the rest of the stories
Yeah,
in the way that it probably should. And it happened. I just thought it would get drawn out a lot longer over the course of the
yeah,
season.
me too.
You know, at least like
Hmm.
one more episode before we found this reveal out. And maybe that's just due to the fact that like we got 3 episodes up front and now we're on a week to week basis, so it kind of feels a little imbalanced. But you know, I think that there could potentially be a path to connect this back and bring it back up in terms of relevance for Frenchie, because now I just don't really know where he goes. Like, does he try to win Colin back? Does he just allow it
Hmm.
to end because of the guilt that he has? Like, I'm just kind of left a little confused about the next steps for his character, so hopefully they do clear that up. I guess as we wrap up here, anything else? Plan on seeing the new film Training A Train starring Will Ferrell? Any desire to go check that out when it hits theaters?
Oh man, I low key would, just because how funny that shit is. I can't believe Will Ferrell was in The Boys. One small thing, Firecracker brought up Kanye West's name. I thought that was fucking hilarious.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
She was like, Kanye West. I was like, wait. I thought that was funny. I hope he pays attention to that. I think some of that stuff is important. Like, I hope, Kanye, do you hear how they talking about you, bro? You need to, yeah, self reflection, brother, self reflection. And then, oh, one other thing, they did a quick, well, I guess it was a news report. I forgot what it was, but the Godolphin kids. They talked about the Godolphin kids like on the news
Yeah.
flash
Hmm.
or whatever. And I was like, oh shoot, y'all really embedding them in this show. So I thought that was cool. Hopefully we'll see them like for real in the season. I really want like one of them to pop up somewhere. So yeah, man. But that's it.
I think they keep doing it, and that's never a mistake. There was also like a reference to Tech Knight in there, and Tech Knight made his first
Oh
appearance
yeah, you're right.
in Gen V too. So it's like, yeah, we're threading those things to potentially come back around in some way. And again, as you talked about just now, the anti V, that was a big key component to Gen V specifically. That was not like introducing the boys. And so like, how are we going to merge those things? How are we going to reconcile that? What role is it going to play in the next
Mhm.
stories that play out over the course of the season? So we'll certainly have to see. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on episode 4, season 4 of The Boys. If you've checked out this latest episode, hit us up and let us know what you think.